The Ottawa housing market just collapsed by 40% overnight, and Prime Minister Justin Trudeau is scrambling behind closed doors as panic spreads through government halls. While Canadian families watch their dreams of home ownership slip away, something much bigger is happening that nobody's talking about. What you're about to discover will change how you see Canada's housing crisis forever. Number 10. Vancouver's foreign buyer exodus. Vancouver's luxury market is hemorrhaging as international investors flee faster than rats from a sinking ship. The once golden real estate haven has become a cautionary tale of what happens when governments try to control market forces with heavy-handed taxation. Chinese investors who once poured billions into Vancouver's skyline are now liquidating properties at losses exceeding 30%. The foreign buyer tax that was supposed to cool the market has instead created a controlled demolition. Local families thought this would be their chance to finally afford homes, but instead, they're watching an economic domino effect that's spreading across the entire province. The ripple effects are reaching into construction jobs, real estate careers, and municipal tax revenues that cities desperately need to function. What's truly shocking is how this connects to a much larger pattern we're seeing across Canada, and Vancouver is just the beginning. Number 9. Toronto's condo apocalypse. Toronto's condo market is experiencing what economists are quietly calling a controlled implosion. Pre-construction deposits worth hundreds of thousands of dollars are evaporating as developers cancel projects left and right. Young professionals who scrape together down payments are discovering their dream condos will never be built, and their deposits are tied up in legal battles that could last years. The city that once symbolized Canada's economic strength is now a graveyard of half-finished towers and broken promises. Interest rate hikes have made financing impossible for developers, while buyers who qualified 2 years ago can't even get approved for a mortgage today. The psychological impact is devastating families who believed they were making the smartest investment of their lives. What makes this even more terrifying is how it's connected to a nationwide banking crisis that most Canadians don't even know is coming. Number 8. Calgary's oil money mirage. Calgary's housing market built on oil wealth is crumbling as commodity prices create chaos in Alberta's economy. The city that once attracted workers from across Canada with promises of high-paying jobs and affordable homes is now a ghost town of foreclosures and abandoned developments. Families who moved from Ontario and British Columbia are trapped in homes worth less than their mortgages, unable to leave even if they wanted to. The energy sector layoffs have created a cascade effect where entire neighborhoods are struggling to maintain property values. Local businesses that depended on oil workers' spending are closing their doors, creating an economic death spiral that's pulling down everything in its path. What's most disturbing is how government policies are accelerating this decline, while politicians claim they're helping working families. The connection between federal energy policies and local housing markets reveals a much darker truth about how Canada's economy really works. Number 7. Montreal's language barrier crisis. Montreal's unique position as a French-speaking metropolis is creating housing market distortions that are tearing communities apart. The language requirements for real estate transactions are driving away potential buyers while creating artificial scarcity in certain neighborhoods. Anglophone families are fleeing to other provinces, leaving behind properties that French-speaking buyers can't afford at current prices. The cultural divide is becoming an economic divide that's reshaping the entire city's demographic future. Young Francophone professionals are competing against each other for increasingly expensive properties while perfectly good homes sit empty because of language barriers in the buying process. The provincial government's housing policies are making the situation worse by adding bureaucratic layers that slow down transactions and increase costs. What's really happening here is a preview of how cultural politics can destroy local economies, and it's spreading to other parts of Canada in ways most people don't realize. Number 6. Winnipeg's Prairie Storm. Winnipeg's housing market is collapsing under the weight of climate change and infrastructure failures that nobody wants to discuss. The city's aging housing stock is becoming uninhabitable as extreme weather events damage foundations and flood basements year after year. Insurance companies are quietly raising rates or refusing coverage entirely, making homeownership financially impossible for middle-class families. The harsh winters are getting more expensive to survive as energy costs skyrocket, turning heating bills into mortgage-sized payments. Young families are discovering that buying a home in Winnipeg means signing up for decades of costly repairs and upgrades just to stay warm and dry. The municipal government is broke and can't afford to upgrade the infrastructure that homes depend on, creating a downward spiral of declining property values and increasing maintenance costs. What's most shocking is how this climate crisis is connecting to housing markets across the prairies, creating a pattern of abandonment that threatens entire communities. Number 5. Halifax's maritime meltdown. Halifax's housing boom has turned into a spectacular bust as Atlantic Canada's economic reality crashes into inflated property values. The city that was supposed to be Canada's affordable alternative has priced out local families while attracting buyers who can't actually afford to live there long term. The job market can't support the housing prices that speculative buying created, leaving homeowners trapped in properties they can't afford to maintain. Young maritime families are watching their ancestral communities become playgrounds for wealthy retirees from Toronto and Vancouver. The fishing and tourism industries that built these communities can't compete with real estate speculation for workers' attention and wages. Local businesses are closing because their employees can't afford to live anywhere near their jobs. What's truly heartbreaking is how this maritime migration is destroying the cultural fabric of communities that survived for generations, and it's happening with government policies that claim to help rural development. Number 4. Regina's Resource Reality Check. Regina's housing market is experiencing a reality check as Saskatchewan's resource-dependent economy faces long-term structural changes. The boom-bust cycle that once made fortunes in prairie real estate is breaking down as global commodity markets shift toward sustainability and technology. Families who bought homes during potash and oil booms are discovering their properties are worth half what they paid, with no recovery in sight. The provincial government's attempts to diversify the economy are too little, too late for homeowners who need to sell now. Young people are leaving Saskatchewan entirely, rather than trying to build lives in a province where housing costs more than career opportunities can support. The agricultural sector that built these communities is consolidating into corporate operations that employ fewer people at lower wages. What's most disturbing is how this pattern of resource exhaustion and population decline is spreading across rural Canada, creating dead zones where communities once thrived. Number 3. Quebec City's cultural crossroads. Quebec City's housing market is being torn apart by competing pressures from tourism, cultural preservation, and economic development. The historic neighborhoods that make the city beautiful are becoming too expensive for the families who built those communities over generations. Short-term rental platforms are converting residential properties into tourist accommodations, displacing long-term residents and destroying neighborhood stability. The provincial government's attempts to protect Quebec culture through housing policies are backfiring by making homes unaffordable for the very people they're trying to help. Tourism revenue that was supposed to benefit local communities is instead flowing to property investors and platform companies based outside Quebec. What's most tragic is how this cultural preservation versus affordability conflict is playing out in communities across Canada, forcing people to choose between heritage and housing. Number 2. Edmonton's energy transition. Trauma. Edmonton's housing market is ground zero for Canada's chaotic energy transition as federal policies clash with local economic reality. The city that built its prosperity on oil and gas is watching property values collapse as government policies systematically destroy the industries that employed homeowners. Families who invested their life savings in Edmonton real estate are discovering that political promises about green jobs don't pay mortgages on homes that nobody wants to buy. The construction industry that built Edmonton's suburban sprawl is dying, as environmental regulations make new development prohibitively expensive. Young people who grew up in Alberta are leaving for provinces where government policies don't actively target their parents' careers and communities. Local politicians are caught between federal mandates and constituents who are losing their homes and livelihoods. What's most infuriating is how this energy transition is being managed by politicians who will never face the personal consequences of their policies, while working families pay the price. Number 1. Ottawa's political panic. Ottawa's housing market crash is exposing the complete failure of Justin Trudeau's economic policies as the capital city becomes unlivable for the civil servants who are supposed to run the country. Government employees who thought federal jobs provided security are discovering they can't afford to live in the city where they work. The irony is devastating, as politicians who created housing policies that destroyed markets across Canada are now facing the consequences in their own backyard. Cabinet ministers are quietly moving their families to suburban communities outside Ottawa while publicly claiming their housing strategies are working. The federal government's own employees are organizing protests against housing policies their bosses created, creating an unprecedented crisis of credibility. International diplomats and business leaders visiting Canada's capital are shocked by the homelessness and housing desperation visible steps from Parliament Hill. What's most damning is how this Ottawa housing crisis reveals the complete disconnect between political rhetoric and economic reality, proving that Canada's leadership has no idea how to solve the problems they created. The housing crisis destroying Canadian dreams isn't accidental or temporary. From Vancouver to Halifax, government policies are systematically dismantling the middle class through housing market manipulation, energy sector destruction, and cultural division. What do you think about these cities and their housing nightmares? Let us know your thoughts in the comments and tell us which city's situation shocked you the most. If you found this investigation helpful, make sure to like, share, and subscribe for more content that reveals what's really happening in Canada. Click on the bell icon to get notified when we release our next video exposing the truth behind political promises.